Welcome everyone. I'm going to talk, I've subtitled this AI Agents Turn Claude into Your Personal Application. You'll see why as we go. So a reminder for those who perhaps haven't been to one of my earlier talks, my experience in computers is very long. I've been writing programs since 1969 when I was still at school. I did a BSc in Electronics and Electrical Engineer at UMIST and finished that in 1975 with a project on object-oriented programs for multi-valued logic. I did my first AI project in 1994, believe it or not, so when I was working for a company in Maidenhead, where we were selling a bit of software which would read a file and convert it. It used AI to convert it into a program, and lots of banks started buying that and using it to read the results of their credit card surveys, so they survey the existing use of people using credit cards and work out what caused people to fail to pay, so they could spot them in advance and not give them a credit card in the first place. Then I did a machine learning course with remote at Stanford University, 2013. I did another course, computational photography, Georgia Institute of Technology in 2013, and then I did a course on interactive programming in Python with Rice University. So that was a busy year for me, learning all sorts of things which are useful with AI. And then used some of that while I was working for a company in Windsor called Global Personals, where we built a system to try and spot fraud, people trying to defraud other people, and by scamming them on the dating website. So I've got a little bit of experience with this stuff. And so in this talk, I'm going to talk a bit about the latest AI models and what new features they've added, where they've added these things called thinking and another thing called agents. And I'm going to specifically talk about Claude because they had a lot of these features first. There were new releases of ChatGPT and a few other models last week or the week before, which have added similar features, and so we're going to talk about how you can use the new features and what problems they could solve for you. So my problem was I wrote a crime novel, and I didn't know if it was good. In fact, I strongly suspect it's bad, and I wanted a proofreader to check it. I tried using real people as proofreaders, and they all started arguing with me about all sorts of stuff they didn't like in it, and I just realised that what I needed was a proofreader who was amenable to reading the thing without arguing about all sorts of stuff. So I mentioned this to Steve some time ago. I remember he was very sceptical that I would ever be able to get an AI to do the job, but luckily what's happened is I actually finished the first draft of my book about 2 months ago, and at that point Claude was just introducing these new features and other people were starting to use them, and I found things on the internet that would allow me to check if I made any mistakes, were there any plot holes in the novel, was there what would make the novel better, and I'd advise me on how to do it. So I started doing some research, and I found some people already working on things, and so I can't say I've developed this talk completely from scratch. I've used a thing called the first 3 levels of building agents from a chap called the Pi Coach, who's made videos on YouTube, and I've also heavily used some stuff from a couple of people from the Future Fiction Academy on YouTube, Elizabeth Ann West and Christine Schilling, who they've done YouTube videos And in fact, with Christine, she was doing Zoom calls where I could ask her all sorts of silly questions, and she was quite happy to answer them. And so I built this thing which will read my book and tell me what's good about it, where the plot holes are, what needs fixing, and I'm going to tell you a bit about it. Unfortunately, because when you run the thing, it takes more than an hour to run. I won't actually be demonstrating it, but I've screen captured a lot of the things that it's told me, and you can see the sort of things it's advised me to do and what I've done. Anyway, a little bit about the latest Claude releases. You've probably seen things on the BBC about Claude Fable, because there was a big row about it because it was so clever that the US government banned it for a while. There was a problem with Starmer was asking Donald Trump to let the British government use it in the meantime. I don't think he had any success. The Trump administration finally lifted the restrictions on the Claude models after there was this alarm over cyber security, and then there was a comment I saw on one of the things which I liked quite a lot. It says an AI that could take out the government infrastructure in dystopian regimes like the UK is a fantastic advancement. We need it now. So I don't know if they got it, but in the meantime, there was a few more articles, positive articles about the whole thing. Jensen Huang said his software engineers were now building agents rather than writing code, and that they preferred doing that. He went on to say that they were doing a lot less coding rather than typing. They were working on building agents with benchmarks and guardrails, and they're taking the mundane work out of building programs. The latest Claude releases, there was a new release in May the 28th, 2026, called Opus 4.8, and I must admit I've built most of what I've done and used what I've done with Opus 4.8, and part of the reason for that is it's cheaper to run than the latest versions. There's a Sonic 5 version which costs more to run than 4.8 and probably could run it, and then there's the Fable 5 versions which costs about twice as much, and I decided to try this stuff out and bought a subscription to Claude because I realised that my free subscription was never going to cope with the amount of work I was going to give it. So I must admit, you'd probably be pleased to know that I found that when I bought my 1-year subscription to Claude for 180 quid, my credit card immediately got blocked, and I haven't been able to use it since.
Nice.
So I don't know whether those two events were connected, but it seems there's a possibility. But I basically, for the last 3 weeks, I haven't been able to use my credit card. I've had to go and get a new one. Just going back to a previous talk I did, we talk about agents before, or at least it was titled that. But basically, it was about what Mind Studio could do with agents, and their idea of an agent wasn't quite the same as things are now. And what's happened over the last few weeks is that various different descriptions of things have changed, and the things we've had are agents, workflows, skills, and harnesses, and the terminology's gotten thrown around, and there's a difference between them. So basically, the best way to think about this is agents think, skills are like something that you can do, and workflows organize what you're doing. So what we were doing in that previous talk I did was really a workflow. And I think I said at the time that it was probably misnamed, and it was really a workflow. And what is a harness? It's a combination of agent skills and workflows put together. And people are starting to call that a harness. That new word has only appeared in the last week or so, as far as I can tell. So you might find that's a new thing. So how do we use all this stuff? Well, one of the things that has become apparent is that most people are hampered by their experience with ChatGPT, because you're used to just giving an instruction to an AI. You probably use ChatGPT first. In fact, Claude worked the same way for a long time. It was just basically something you could ask a question of, get an answer back, and it was a little bit limiting. But what's happened is over time things have improved, and in 2026 we need to change the mindset and go away from this idea of crafting prompts. We want to think to really build a system. And what I'm going to talk about really today is building a system to solve a problem. I built my system first of all to solve this book reading problem and get it to criticize and provide some sensible criticism about a book I've written. And one of the things that has stopped me doing that earlier was, partly I hadn't finished writing the book, but even just giving it the chapters of the book was a thing called the context size. So over time, basically a year ago, there was a limited amount of data you could give to an AI. It would, if you gave it a whole book, it would only have remembered the last chapter or the last two chapters. But now it's quite possible for it to remember a whole book. So you can give it a whole book and ask it global questions about the book, which you couldn't do until quite recently. So what's the difference between AI chat versus AI agents versus an AI API? Because there are different ways of running the things. So if you go for the free Claude version, you'll find that you're kind of limited to this AI chat thing, which is similar to what ChatGPT does. So you basically give it a prompt and you get a response. So it's this like conversation you can have. So the alternative is to have an agent, and what you can do with an agent is give it a goal. And if you give it a task or a goal, it can plan the steps needed, so it can make a workflow. It can write prompts for itself to do the various steps in the workflow. So if you were at my previous talk, when I was talking about that workflow builder, we were having to tell the AI or create a prompt for each step. What you can do now with Claude is give it a goal, and it will create a workflow for you to solve your problem, and it will create all the steps itself and create prompts for those steps. And it will, so you'll get not just one agent, but maybe multiple agents. And the subscription I paid for will let me do that. Unfortunately, the one thing that the subscription I paid for won't let me do is call an API. And occasionally I do want to do that. I might have an app. In fact, the app I've built with Claude, I want it to send messages to Claude and solve sub-problems with the app I've built. And I've had to have a different subscription to do that, unfortunately. Luckily, I already had one which I set up with a tool which allows you to call different AIs. So I can point it at a Chinese AI if I want, which is a lot cheaper. So what about these different levels? So level 1 was is going from prompts to using Markdown files. So we can teach Claude, for example, how to create a blog article by creating a prompt or making the prompt cleverer by it can read articles you've written for blogs before, create your writing voice, learn how to structure how things you want to structure, what words you want to avoid in your blog article, for example, how you want the blog article to look. And so we're moving from what to do to how to do it, and this makes the workflow become controllable. So rather than just giving it a request that says, for example, write a blog article about the Basingstoke MakerSpace, we can tell it much more about how we want that article to look. And we do that by creating a Markdown file. Now, Markdown is just basically a text file, but it's structured so that it's got headings, and so it's a bit like having a high-level heading which has one hashtag in front of it, lower-level headings which have two hashtags. You can even have third-level headings with 3 hashtags. And by creating this, you can create a structure to something you're telling Claude to do. And you can also use Markdown files with the latest versions of GPT as well. So so this is an example of a Markdown file. It's saying when you're making a blog post, the best thing to do is to start with a personal story, put in 3 tips. Don't put each tip should be a real example of something. End with a clear takeaway that the reader can apply. What should the writing style be like? 2 to 3 sentence paragraphs. Use you more than I. Don't use corporate jargon. Never use "in today's world, let's dive in," or "this is a game changer." These are all. You can put a whole list of things in there that you don't want to use, that are corporate speak or whatever sort of thing you want to avoid. And then you can say how you format it. You could say no bullet points inside the body. Only use them for lists of tools. Bold the first sentence of each tip. How long you want the whole thing. So that would act as a much more clever prompt by asking Claude to look at the Markdown file and follow the instructions inside it. Then you can take this to a new level. You can create prompt libraries and make them. This is what Claude calls skills. And in the last week or so, GPT has introduced skills as well. So now what you can do is, instead of explaining the preferences every time, you connect that file you created, that Markdown file, as a skill. And then you can make multiple skills. So you can have skills for all sorts of different things. And what you'll find later on is that if you've got multiple skills, it makes it easier for Claude to have multiple agents. And I'll talk a bit more about that as time goes on. And the best part is you don't have to save skills in a file and copy and paste them like you might have been copy and pasting prompts. You know, when I was trying different things with Claude earlier, before these latest versions, I had this huge text file with prompts in that I was repeating and finding the right prompt and then copying and pasting it, and then it would do that thing for me. But now I've got a whole set of skills, and the skills get triggered automatically when Claude realizes it needs them. So you label these Markdown files with skills, and then you label them saying what this skill is for. We'll see some examples as we go on. So the other thing you can do is, if you've got a prompt that's done something useful for you in the past, you can effectively tell Claude, you can turn on this feature in Claude's, the Skill Creator feature, and say, when you did this for me before, go look through the log and find what I said, and you find something that worked effectively to do the job, and you can create a new skill or update an existing skill that extends Claude's capabilities with the specialized knowledge that it needs to do a particular job. So if you were going to make a skill from scratch, you could do it by talking to Claude. You'd make sure the skill creator is on in capabilities. You go to capabilities, skills, example skills, turn that on, start a new chat or a project, and Claude could then pull from your existing things, or you tell Claude what you want the skill to do, and it will it might ask you a few questions and build a skill, package it, and offer to copy it into your skills file. You test it and refine it, maybe modify it. Because it's a Markdown, it is actually built as a Markdown file, you can even go and edit it. Then you can take that, go from chat windows to AI that executes. But in order to do that, you need to move away from the chat window. In fact, to build the skills, you need to move away from the chat window. You need to download the Claude application so you can turn on that build a skill feature. And then Claude will allow you to use AI that executes. And you've got different ways you can use that. But there's a couple of applications I've been using. I used Claude Code for a while. It's a command line interface. I know some people like them. I hated it because basically it looks like one of those really old computers where you just give it an instruction and it just looks wrong to me. So I started using VS Code, which is actually an open source version of a thing called Microsoft Visual Studio. It's got a GUI. It's really designed for writing programs, but I found you can just plug in a plugin for it, for Claude into it, and I believe there's a plugin for ChatGPT as well, or whatever they're calling it now, GPT, I think, without the word chat in front of it. You can plug that in and use that IDE. It's used by programmers to write programs, but basically I found that Elizabeth, who was one of the people on the Future Fiction Academy, had started using it to write books. VS Code, it has an extension for Claude, and you can plug it in. It provides you with a GUI interface, and you can edit and review Claude's plans before accepting them. So you can ask Claude to plan out something. It will say what it's planning to do, and then you can say, no, I want you to do it slightly differently from that. Or you can say, yes, I agree, that sounds like a good way of doing the job. And then you can also access your conversation history and create skills from that conversation history. You can even open multiple conversations in separate tabs and windows and have several things going on at once. If you can cope with that, I must admit I find it quite difficult to cope with that idea. Here's an example of it reading my book. So I've set up here on the left hand side you can see the structure of a directory I've got called writing. I'm sorry all this is a bit far away and small, but so the directory structure is on the left. My book is in there. It's got various different bits and pieces, and I stole most of this off the Future Fiction Academy, including the directory of skills, which I'll show you later. So it's gone through the book and it's found interesting things that it liked, where it didn't like various things. It's got various different things here on the right hand side, and there are inconsistencies in the story. And so it then goes and sets off. It got things that I can follow up and deal with. But then there's another level you can move on to, which is this swarm of agents level. And with the swarm of agents, what's happening is that you set off one agent which will go off and plan and look at how to deal with various things in the project you're dealing with, and then use another lot of agents, each of them identifying separate skills that will go off and do the work. And because I stole a lot of what Elizabeth had written for her application, I'm basically using the same structure, but basically it's gone through my book, and for example, this is one of the things it's done. There's this feature she wrote a skill for, which is avoiding using the same expression multiple times. So it read through my book and it found that I had 79 places where I've written "I realise" or "I realise" that used the word realisation, and that's too much in the whole book. So it's gone through then and corrected 52% of them for me. So I got it to read through and edit the thing for me at the same time by setting up an agent that created what they call a crutch list, and another one which could fix the thing and make suggestions. And then there was other places where I'd used ellipses a lot. So it's identified 184 times that I've done that, and I basically haven't let it go and fix those things because I didn't have an agent to fix that, but I fixed those manually. And then there are other times when I've used stomach churning or lurches or clenches or twists, and it's said there 16 times. Maybe that's not too bad in a book. There are other times when there's other things. So it's gone through all these things, and then on top of looking for those things which are thought to be possibly bad if there's a lot of them, it also looked through and found other things that I'd done which it didn't like. Like I'd use semicolons in some places to join two sentences together, and it's found 45 times across 35 scenes, and they're joining two independent clauses where I probably should have used something, so I changed those manually. And there was a bit where it swallowed hard 6 times, but there you go. It's off doing its job. Now there is one problem with the way it's doing its job. It was doing it by creating this agent that was managing the other agents, and in 5 hours, every 5 hours you get a certain amount of usage for your what is basically £20 a month. But it was in 5 hours it used, in fact it didn't take 5 hours, it took about an hour of running this program. It used my 5-hour allowance. So basically then it stopped. And basically you then have to wait 3 hours or so, and then it will let you use the next 5 hours worth of stuff. So the app just basically gives you a restart button, and you just come back after 3 hours and hit the restart button, and the whole thing will start up again. This is why I haven't decided to run it here and show you, because it would immediately stop and it would be a bit boring. Whereas by capturing the screen, I can show you what it actually did, and it could go on and do various things. So let's have a look at some of the files. First of all, Elizabeth of the Future Fiction Academy wrote a white paper about why her novel writing machine didn't work very well, her original attempts, by just saying, Claude, write me a book about... She's an expert on Jane Austen, so she writes Jane Austen fan fiction. So she would say, write me a book about Mr. Darcy and Jane Austen and Emma, or whoever it was. I don't know anything about Jane Austen, so, but anyway, so she wrote this this thing here. Let me just jump over. Actually, I have to make this a lot smaller, don't I? So she wrote this thing about the novel writing machine, and basically she goes through various different things about why single agent writing pipelines break and what you need to do. So she invented this idea of her other interest is Formula One racing, so she based this idea on a Formula One analogy. So she's got this thing where you have a race where the agents are racing each other to finish the book and do various different things in the book. And so she's got the idea of a garage, a race, and a thing called Parc Fermé, which is a post-race inspection of what goes on. I don't know. Ursula, do those words mean something to you?
Parc Fermé?
Yeah.
It's this closed something or other. Closed part, I'm not sure what it means.
I just wonder whether your experience with motor racing might...
No, I watch it, but I don't go into the details.
Fair enough.
I never listen to all the talks, I just watch the race.
So anyway, she based this idea. So she's got a thing called a story dossier, which outlines the story that she wants to write. The words world state ledger, the characters, and then the driver runs a lap. And the way she got the thing set up, she gets different chapters written by different agents, and she gets stewards to audit what's going on, and it goes around a loop. Each loop round is the next chapter, so it's like it laps around the track. And then at the end she does this thing with inspectors sweep through, flag the things that are wrong, and this is the bit I'm using to read my book. So I haven't used the first bit that she's written, which writes the book for you, but I've just used the final bit to inspect my book and to tell me what's wrong with it. But in order to do some of that, I had to get Claude to write me a dossier and an outline. But I just gave it the book and said, create a dossier and an outline from this book, and it was quite happy using the rules that Elizabeth had set up and the skills that she had set up to help identify it.
Parc Fermé, according to this, is locks Formula One cars into their qualifying setup from qualifying one until the race starts, and it tells them what teams can and cannot change under the regulations.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense, because inside the skills that Elizabeth wrote, there's a lot of rules about which of those agents can use to write certain things. So there's an agent that can write an outline. So here's a list of the different skills, and she's called them the names of the agents. So there's a story engineer, which creates the dossier, creates the outline, what the payoffs in the story are, what the tensions in the various scenes are, and the telemetry baselines. I'm not sure what that is, but then there's a world engineer, which understands the world you're in. So I guess if it's Jane Austen, it's this area a few years ago, or somewhere around Bristol or wherever she lived. The character lead creates the characters, creates backstories for the characters, their micro histories, what they are interested in, and so on. The naming mechanic gives names from the period, the region, appropriate to the book you're writing, and there's a style auditor that you can use to validate what you're writing, and it's all in the same style. Which I guess you don't want AI. If the AI was writing a book, you'd have a problem with that. You could have a problem with that. So anyway, each lap gets watched goes around the loop. There's details about the pit crew, backstory mechanic, continuity mechanic, and she's come up with this idea all based on the Formula One racing, and I just stole it. So anyway, I did want to give so the bit I'm really using to read my book is after the checkered flag, the inspector, the inspection. So there's a grammar mechanic, so it's looking for things. The crutch inspector, I showed you the results of that, where it's found things where I overused words or overused things which are a bit bad in a book. There's also pacing inspector, a reader simulator, a payoff auditor. So, for example, if I've got a thing in because my book is a murder mystery, if there's a clue in there and I haven't explained the result of the clue and whether it was valid or not at the end, the payoff auditor tells me you've put this clue in, but you haven't explained it properly, or you've explained something but there was never a clue to it. So it does both ends. It makes sure that all the clues have payoffs and so on. So that's basically what I was using. So then if I go and let's go here, we'll have a look at the files. So using her files, they're structured like this. We've got like a book machine engine. It's got this thing called Architecture MD, which is this contract. And in this contract, it tells, this is a Markdown file, which is telling Claude how to run everything. So it's telling it what agents are and where the different rules for the agents are. Now, Claude has a way of putting agents in a particular directory or in a particular file, but Elizabeth has found that by putting them in your own files and then telling Claude where they are, you can actually use the whole lot with GPT as well. So you can use Claude or GPT, and what she's set up here is different skills which are going to be used by the agents, and then there's different things about. So here she's talking about the phases and how it goes through the different phases, how it keeps a race for a log, and she's used Formula 1 terms all the way through. And then she's written an example of a start of a book, which I haven't really looked at, but basically I used some of the structure of her example to convert my book into Markdown files, because the way her stuff works, she wants everything in scenes, and I'd written my book in chapters. So the first thing I had to do was get Claude to break my book down out of chapters into scenes. But it did that without any trouble, apart from it stopped halfway through and I had to restart it again. And it took 2 or 3 hours to do the whole job. But anyway, so here she tells you how to run the thing. I haven't actually tried running it because I wasn't actually wanting it to write a book, but I did want it to run. So in general, when I was running her skill thing, I just said to Claude, please pretend you're the I've forgotten what she called it now, the race manager or whatever it was called, and ask and go away and create the right files, and then go and run the end of race checks. So if we have a look at the skills folder, you can see that she's written skills she's got folders here doing various different jobs, all these different things. Oh, team principle, that's the skill which will control the whole thing, and that's what I was running. So if we go back here, I can show you some of the other stuff. I had she, as part of what she did, she created this storyboard, which I found useful in the end, because Claude said, okay, there's a couple of scenes in your story which would be better if they were in a different order. So this storyboard thing is, shows you all the chapters in the story, and then it shows you what scene they are. Can we get this? And then I also added a new feature. I asked Claude, one of the things I've been doing in order to help me write the story was doing photographs of the various different events in the story, and that helped me describe them. So here's the murder in the murder mystery, or when my hero, who's played by Jocelyn here, finds the murdered victim, played by Nikki Phillips, dead on the floor, and this helped me write the story when I was doing it. So each of these, I've basically added this picture facility to her thing just by asking Claude to do it. So what I'm doing here is I've taken her application that she wrote, and I'm just customizing it for me. Yeah. And the whole idea here is that you build an application that does the job you want to do. It might never get released to anybody else. In fact, it's probably not a good idea to release it to anyone else, because it's been built by an AI, and who knows what the security's like. It's probably rubbish. I haven't even tried it. But at the moment, it's only me that can access it on my machine at home. It's nowhere else in the world. And you can basically go through the thing. And one of the things I was having trouble with and decided was I got in my head that the characters a bit mixed up. So what I wanted was a character sheet. So I created another character sheet. And again, it's got the ability to upload a photo of each character. I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to, because I want to just finalise that and sort a few things out. So it's got in there details of the character. You can go through all the details, and it goes into various different things. And I've even since I saved this version of the thing, I've created a thing where it reads the book and it works out what that character's actions are in the book, what their what their Myers-Briggs type is, what their Enneagram type and their Clifton strengths are. So you can basically make sure the character doesn't act out of character. So you compare what their characteristics are from one chapter to another, and if they're in line with each other. So in order to do that, I did two things. I used VS Code as my interface, and I created an interface to do some of the things by writing a program, or getting Claude to write a program, and I used a bit of Elizabeth's program as well that she'd written for scenes. But what if your thing isn't a book? What if it's something else? Well, one of the things that is around is there are lots of different tools around that can be abused or used with ChatGPT or with Claude. And one of the ones that looks really interesting to me is this thing called Obsidian. And Obsidian draws this graph of the relationships between documents. And I've already got this idea for a second book, that's like a follow-on story to this first book I've written. But in order to do that, I've been doing some research into some areas I don't know, and I was using an application to save all the details, but it was all getting lost. And then I found Obsidian, and I also found somebody had used Obsidian with Claude and written a chap called Wes Roth, who I think Steve introduced me to on YouTube. He had done some stuff with Obsidian, and I found basically what this allows you to do is to take a topic, feed a load of articles into it, and get Claude to link all these topics together. It builds a wiki with all the articles you've identified, either uploaded or URLs you've posted, and it then will link them together. So you can see here that I've got like an index for things which are gene editing and genetic engineering, because that's one of the themes of the book. And then you've got another thing, which is I'm trying to make it sound like they're teenagers talking. So I wanted a thing about teen speech and slang, and it will find all these articles and categorize them, makes them much easier to find, so I can write my next book a lot easier by cataloguing all the things I've collected over the last 2 or 3 years while I was writing the first book, and finding things that might be useful in the second book. So that's quite a good way to do it. So what I needed to do to get that graph built was to give a whole bunch of folders. So I had all these things stored in Evernote, which was driving me crazy anyway. So I exported them all and placed the files in a directory, and I basically said, please convert these into the wiki pages, and then we can that I can use for Obsidian. And Claude's come back to me and said, I'll start by looking at the raw directory to understand what we're working with. It ran a few commands to find it, and then I gave up. I told it to stop and told it exactly where the directory was, and then it started running commands. So it's setting off an agent to do this, and it's just carrying on. And then it decided that it had so much to look at, it was actually going to run 19 different agents simultaneously and split the documents into different sections, and it worked its way through. So it started building the concepts that needed in the structure of the wiki, and of course it's rapidly reached its usage limit, and each of these agents started failing, and I got a list of where all these tasks failed. So I had to, this was a couple of nights ago, and I just basically went to sleep, and the next morning I hit the try again button, and it started working again. And it basically understood where it had got to. It reviewed what it had done so far and carried on. It created, so it had 18 agents that were running that had failed, and then it worked out some new stuff, and it asked me, during this time it keeps asking you if it's okay for it to look at your stuff on your computer, and you have to hit the allow button or deny button as appropriate. So it started resuming things, and or it was working through the various different things, and then it decided that it needed various different agents, fewer batches. It could do the rest with fewer agents, and then it started working again on what it needed to do. So it carried on looking at various different things that I'd given it. I'd given it some stuff about sororities in America as well, because I thought about a third book. So it starts going through this thing, and then it finally catalogues all the 242 sources that I'd given it, and created 13 concepts and the pages, summaries of the things, and linked them all together, so that then I've got my graph which you saw earlier. So has anybody got any questions about all that? Have I confused you all? What do you think?
What's your conclusion?
My conclusion is that it can be very useful. It's looking at stuff on my machine. It's I've limited what Claude can see on my machine by only putting everything in a particular directory. It has a copy of my book. I have another copy somewhere else which is backed up as well. So I don't entirely trust it, because it can do all sorts of things. But I've kind of limited what it can do by all those skills, all those instructions. Often they say, do this, do not do this. There's lots of do not do things in there, which I realised, having read through some of what Elizabeth had written and what some other people had written, that putting those rules in, limiting what it can do, is a very good idea.
Do you own the copyright of the book, or does Claude?
The copyright of the book is mine because I wrote it.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did. I wrote it. I'm only given the book. I've given Claude the book to look at and tell me what's wrong with it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I'm rewriting it based on what Claude has suggested. I haven't taken all of its suggestions.
As far as I know, machines are allowed to copyright things. So there's no anything an AI tool creates is not copyrightable until you then own it as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the Supreme Court in the US ruled that, and I think the UK
Likely to follow it. Yeah. Yeah. So now I'm not sure where Elizabeth's using the book. She's using some of that stuff to write a complete book. That's a different thing. She says she edits the book completely and rewrites a lot of it. So she probably owns the copyright. But if you just used it like the way, remember that other talk I did where it was just following that workflow and creating a book by writing chapter after chapter, I don't see any way I could own the copyright for that, because I didn't do a thing apart from make the list of things. Whereas here, what I've just done is use some of what Elizabeth's done to validate her books, to validate a book that I wrote the hard way.
You've used Claude to analyse the book. Have you used ChatGPT to do the same?
No, because you couldn't do the same with it until about 2 weeks ago, and I was well into still using Claude to finish the job at that point. I will probably do the same with ChatGPT. But the problem is, in both cases, you have to pay to get enough service. So whether I can afford to pay for ChatGPT and Claude,
doesn't sound worth it.
It's going to be difficult. It's difficult to justify. And I think Claude has been very helpful here. It's given me lots of editing to do. And once I've done that, I might get it to look at it again, because maybe I'll have made more mistakes. I don't know.
It's interesting that if you ignore how Claude has done all of this, what I certainly found interesting, on holiday, I read 2 books that were both detective novels.
Yeah.
One of them, I spent my whole time going backwards and forwards. There'd be a new character and I had to go back. It was the most really clever book. It had twist after twist. It was a good book, but I spent the whole time with my thumb in the first few pages.
That wasn't really.
And the second one, actually each chapter had a definite person talking, and you knew it at the top, and the chapters were short, but it equally had lots of twists. And I felt the second one was much better than the first one. But that comes back to what you said about agents. It turned out the first book was written by an author that was actually a man and a wife, and they each wrote every chapter and then they merged them together. And so they were sort of doing what your agents were doing. They were comparing with each other, and they were but it was kind of annoying at the end that the whole thing got totally logically consistent, but with so many characters. You know, every time a new character popped up, I knew I'd heard the name before, but I had to go back to page 25 and find out.
Isn't that a memory problem on your part?
Oh yeah, quite probably. But
you need a bigger context window in your head.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, so you know, perhaps having multiple agents, you need to be careful that they are.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, I'm still now in the editing phase with the suggestions that Claude's given me.
Yeah.
So is this what you meant by about guardrails and limiting what the agents can do?
Yes. Yeah, because you know, basically there have been cases where people haven't been careful, haven't created guardrails, and as a result, it's deleted everything. It's just gone, oh yeah, I don't like that, we'll delete it. And it's deleted chunks of things. And they might have been writing a program, they might have been writing an essay, they might have been writing a dissertation, you know.
Did you have any times where it ignored what you said?
At the beginning, before I got this far, and I stole some of what Elizabeth had done and realised, I had times when it would say, yeah, it didn't like that bit, and it wasn't going to do what I asked it to do. It was going to do something different, which it thought would be better, and I'm going, no. But I've done two things to make my life easier. One is I put everything. You probably realised that I was using GitHub. I put the whole book into GitHub, so that means I've got a copy somewhere else that I can go back to. I can if I make a change or if something changes, I can step the change back. So I've got belt and braces on it.
Have you found using multiple agents has reduced hallucination rates? I mean, I know I have from my experience doing coding programs with it, but I think having multiple agents double-checking things can sometimes reduce that. I don't know if you found that yourself.
Yes. Basically, one of the instructions that Elizabeth advised putting into the agents is do not invent. And there are lots of places where it says do not invent things. In fact, the same was true with that thing where I was creating the merging the things together to create that graph for my research. Basically, one of the things in there, it says do not invent anything that's not in any of the documents. Only deal with what's in the documents, because it's creating summaries, and there's a danger where it's supposed to create the summaries that it will invent something where but there were one or two cases where it specifically said I've got two documents and they say exactly the opposite, and so I can't create a summary that merges the two without saying one of them, so I'll keep them separate and just highlight the fact that they do say different things. It doesn't try to reconcile the different things.
Where's this Claude live? Silicon Valley?
I expect so.
No, you pay a fee to
I pay to a company called Anthropic. Yeah, they're I think they started in France and they are now moved to somewhere in California.
They've got offices in London, everywhere now.
Yeah.
They were basically the people that were worried about AI who left all the other companies, and so they have a very different attitude. They view that you should grow an AI in a good environment, rather than telling it what to do.
Yeah.
So Claude has a constitution, which is really interesting reading.
Shall we stop the film now?
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you for listening. I hope it wasn't too off topic.